Hello, everyone. This is Rachel from the future going through and doing some editing. As I've been editing, I've been noticing a lot of background noise, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry. This is a learning process for us, and this has been one of my biggest ventures, and I'm really excited for it. But that also means I'm going to make some mistakes because this is a learning process. However, I am super excited about today's excursion. That was weird. Discussion. So please enjoy what we have for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I'm Not the Book Expert, but She Is. My name is Maggie, and I am not the book expert, but I did finish the book for this week, and that is saying something.
Okay, rude. I have read this book more than once.
Yes.
So I just didn't finish this specific reread, and the last time I read them was just in January, so it's not like it's been that long.
Yeah, but you still didn't finish it.
Okay, whatever. I am Rachel. I am the book expert for today, and we are still joined by my sister.
I'm Leah, and like Rachel said, I'm her sister, and I also know Maggie from college, and we're good friends, so I'm excited to be here.
We're all friends here.
Are we, though?
Sometimes.
Well, I'll just see myself out then. It's clear that I am not needed anymore.
Okay, but you all said you were going to mock me because I didn't finish this reread of it.
Even I finished this one.
Even Leah finished
Come
this
on,
one.
man.
Whatever. But we are still recording today's episode on the same day, same time approximately that we did the last one, except we did stop for lunch. But they end up leaving, right? They leave Pa at the shrine, and there's some weird signals going up for the crows of like, hey, somebody needs to be dealt mercy, LOL JK, never mind, wait, LOL JK JK.
Like beacons keep going up and going out.
Yes, and everybody's like, what is going on?
What is happening?
So
To quote the Percy Jackson musical.
Yes. Our band of crows meets up with another band of crows that had just been turned away from a village, and our band of crows is like, hey, we're going to go check it out in the morning. You guys want to stay with us? They have this whole big interaction. Their crow chief realizes that Fi has all the phoenix teeth and ends up stealing her teeth the next morning, and we end up going the opposite direction because we need to continue on with the story.
That crow chief puts Fi in like a healer's sleep or something.
A coma, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called a healer's sleep, but we would call it a coma.
So people weren't able to wake her up in the morning. They thought like something was really wrong. And I think one of the hawks, it might have been
Lakima
wakes her.
Who finally like figures out what it is and then goes from there.
Yeah. And this other chief, I don't even remember his name. He's really not that important to me.
He is compared to Hangdog.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute. But he asks Fi for phoenix teeth, and Fi gives him some. She's stingy with them,
but she gives him enough.
She gives him plenty, and she tells him there is more at
Genmar's
shrine. But that's not enough for this other crow chief, and maybe Fi should have given him a little bit more.
But she gave him 6 teeth.
She gave him a lot.
Yeah.
That said, and he just decides to steal the rest of her phoenix teeth. He steals her whole bag of teeth. Actually.
Entire bag, a bag given to her by Tavin with his baby tooth in it, so she always knows if he's okay.
Yep.
Not cool.
Not cool,
and
man.
And he stole it. If I saw him, I would punch him. It would be like a throat punch. Like, now you don't get to talk.
Yep.
And he would deserve it too. And I don't feel bad about saying that.
His name is Drudge.
Yes. None of the crows really have nice names.
Yeah, that's their naming convention.
Yeah.
You're named after the first foul word spoken after your birth.
Yes. Except, of all of them, I think Fi has the nicest name.
Yes.
And that was definitely intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here for it.
But,
yeah.
It's fine.
So we being our band of crows, go to that village that has had these weird plague beacons, and they're essentially sent away. Like, there are 2 other crow bands there already, and the crows are arguing with their arbiter, the crane arbiter of the town.
Mm-hmm.
And the crane is like, no, go away, we don't want you. We can deal with our own plague dead like the palace did. And every crow is like, you are a dummy head.
everyone who's lived through the past couple years in the United States was like, you're a dummy head.
Yes.
Sorry. I just...
And because Phi's band is traveling with the Hawks, Lakima is like, hey, do you want me to go help with this situation, or do you want me to stand back? So Lakima is very much giving Phi the choice of, like, do you want to fight this battle on your own, or do you want allyship? Like, do you want us to help? And Phi is like, ha, you can do this one. Because Lakima has a higher ranking in the hierarchy than a crane arbiter. And Lakima's like, move aside or I will make you. And Phi's like, no, don't touch him. He has the sinner's brand.
He gonna die.
He gonna die. And we are not gonna feel bad. And all the other crows are like, you're stupid.
I mean, it is tragic. Like, you know, people get sick and dying. That's tragic. But, like, also, like...
But, like,
what an idiot.
This crane arbiter is... He's killed, what did they say, a quarter of his town?
Mm-hmm. He's directly responsible. Not that he held the knife in his hands himself, but, like, the lack of care in containing and dealing with the plague has led to more deaths, which... Anyway. But the other thing that happens at this town is we meet two other bands of crows. Mm-hmm. They're led by crows named Jade and Ruffian. Jade, I was wondering where the name Jade came from.
Right? Because Jade is kind of nice, unless it came from, like, Jaded.
Oh.
That could be it.
Interesting. I like Jade. But they find out that, like, Phi is Pa's adopted daughter, and, like, apparently Pa has a name for himself in crow circles, which makes sense.
Yeah, because Pa is always very giving.
Yes.
But as noted, and as is fairly accurate in real life, is giving comes at a price.
Mm-hmm. But what they say is, one of them asks Phi, they talk about they're going to have to take care of this town, like this town is doomed, and they're going to have to work their three bands together to take care of the town.
Which is called an ash harvest, because they have to burn the entire village down.
Mm-hmm. And they ask Phi, like, what's your teeth stock like? And Phi's like, well, funny story about that.
I have none, except for...
all what's on my neck, and that's it. And Ruffian let out, this is page 67. Ruffian let out a laugh of disbelief. Dina's wrath, and you still answered the beacon? Aye, your cur's kin, to be sure. No doubt, Jade said. Do you know who took them? Anyway, and then they continue talking about it. But I love that recognition of Phi being compared to the person who raised her. And just, I think it's a nice reassurance that she gets, that she is capable of being chief. Like, your father taught you well kind of attitude. But then Jade and Ruffian find out that Drudge is the one who took Phi's teeth.
And they're like, ugh. Understandably.
They say, or Ruffian says, he'd cut our throats to look after his band. Can't fault him for it, but 2-second clever doesn't last. Which is the same word used to describe, that Pa uses to describe hangdog in the first book.
In my annotation here, it says, so Drudge is hangdog, had hangdog become a chief. So they start going around dealing mercy, marking up the village, and they're nearing the end. So Phi is kind of washing off her rags because she wears rags around her arms to prevent the blood from getting on her and stuff. And all of a sudden, we hear... I'm trying to figure out how far I want to go with this. They hear a whistle, which is a telltale sign of the skin gas. And Phi is talking to Ruffian at the well. And next thing you know, the crane arbiter, who had his throat slit, is
on the pyre and sits up.
And is killing Ruffian. And because we didn't really talk about this in the last book, but the skin gas are literally like the skin of a dead body.
It's like zombies, but it's just like the skin
But
bag.
just the skin, yeah.
It's creepy. I do not wish to see it
vile
visually presented.
Yes. I forgot how much this chapter makes me want to vomit.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
And the whistling is from the wind whistling through the empty bags of skin.
Right.
Which is something.
But one of the things that happens at this ash harvest is Fi has to deal mercy to, like, small children.
Mm-hmm.
And that really sticks with her. So, because this, 5 score of people, I think is what they say, so 100 people have all died.
Yep.
They can now all become skin gas that are manipulated by a particular villain that we all know and hate.
Risana.
Yes. And she instructs them to destroy what the crows are doing, prevent them from actually setting fire to everything, and...
The only way to destroy the skin gas is with fire.
Yes.
They cannot be stabbed.
Right. Well, they can be stabbed.
It just won't do much.
It won't affect them. So... Who comes to the rescue?
Before we get to the rescue, I'm sorry, I'm going to hold you just a little bit. Because I want to talk about the conversation that Fi and Ruffian have right before Ruffian gets murdered.
Yeah. 74?
They're washing up, 74 and 75. So Ruffian is saying, most of us get night terrors after our first ash harvest, Ruffian said. They pass with time. Let others take your watch shift. Try to keep yourself busy. You might get short with your band for no reason or want to run off by yourself, but that's... His brow furrowed as he searched for words. It's like an asp bite, this. You don't let the poison sit until you lose an arm. You bleed it out. If you can't talk to anyone in your band, find a shrine and talk to the keeper. We have them for a reason. And I like that because I wrote in the margins, the crows have therapists, which is more than I can say for myself.
This is why we have a podcast.
This is why we have a podcast. The crows did not have a podcast. Can you imagine?
If the crows had a podcast?
Can you imagine, Fi hosts a podcast, right, with her band of crows.
Yes.
And we have Madcap's Crude Story Hour.
Love them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Silly Songs with Larry.
Except not that.
Except the opposite.
Except the
right.
opposite.
But it's like that interlude.
We're on the same wavelength.
Yes, we are.
But I really like that note because you don't see a lot of talk of, anytime a story has stuff about mental health and trauma and things, it's always, contemporary fiction, and that is important.
Yeah.
But we don't see a lot of that in how care happens in a fantasy setting where, you don't have antidepressants, necessarily.
Right.
And, to see that kind of attention being paid in this culture where trauma happens very often.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to point that out. So anyway, there's skin gasps everywhere, we're all panicking.
It's all super wet now because they're all bloody and nasty and gross.
And it's hard to start a fire because everything's wet.
Yes. Leah, who comes to the rescue?
Tavin!
Tavin! The boy.
The boy. Here comes the
boy. He comes in and, literally lights the place on fire. He is tearing through the world trying to find Fi, and we will find out why in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But he's, literally there and just burning everything down. It's very much a shoot first, ask questions later situation, and we're here for that because
the first thing we know is somebody shouts Fi's name.
Yes.
And
on
then,
page 83.
Through the smoking wreckage strode the last person Fi expected to see, his face full of fury and fear as he took in the commons. Golden fire still rolled off his fingertips. And of course it is Tavin. Anyway. And she just looked at him and she's like, I forgot you could do that.
It literally says, but instead of something sly or honey-tongued, Fi found herself just looking at Tavin's still burning hands and croaking, I forgot you could do that. I love that.
Because she was thinking of something.
Right. She
the next thing she would say to him after
Mm-hmm.
seeing him after first, so long not seeing him. But that's what came out.
That's what came out.
And I
True
love it. Also on the next page, 84, Wretch leans over to Jade, and so it says Wretch muttered something to Jade. The older chief coughed. You could walk him about town so he stays clear of the plague dead. I'll see to the wounded. So, Jade now knows that Fi and Tavin are a thing because a wretch told her. And I am here for this communication.
Gossip.
No, but, like, it's done in such a loving way.
Yeah.
Like, they slept together. Like, but also, like, not a single crow other than Hangdog has judged Fi for sleeping with Tavin.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the judgment comes from the higher castes looking down on her. And like her, I'm gonna call them her band of hawks.
Yes.
Are totally with her on her side. And it's the other hawks that are a problem still.
Yeah.
Are we surprised? No. Leah shuddered, and I thought she was going to say yes, but but she is not.
It's just cold.
I'm just cold.
Do you need another sweatshirt?
No, I'm good.
So Tavin has returned. We love Tavin. And he's like, I have been looking for you, and Vimo helped me find you, but moving on to the next thing, we're bringing you back. And Fi's like, Vimo?
Hang on.
Let's go back like 5 steps here, Tavin.
You did what?
And honestly, I am here for this whole discourse between, like, Fi and Vimo and that whole struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But, do we need to talk about Safe?
Chapter 7 is titled Safe and Sound.
Which is on page 91.
Page 91. So they finally leave the ash harvest, and they're on the road again. They go south for several hours, that's how the chapter opens, until they finally feel safe enough to set up camp and wash up and everything.
Safe enough?
They finally feel safe enough.
Safe?
Safe?
Are they safe?
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna be safe?
But there's also discussion about Tavin needs to wash up because he was walking around the town setting things on fire.
Yeah, so he needs the protection from the plague.
So he needs to wash up so he doesn't get plague. But is there a safe way to wash up in the river where he won't get all the, what would you say, runoff from the crows who are washing up, right? Rachel, would you like to read this scene?
I would love to read this scene. I'm gonna start a little further up on 93.
Go for it.
Can someone get the salt and soap shells? Fi asked Lakima's hawks, then pointed to the river. Crows, we all need to wash up, even if you don't think you touched a sinner today. Coda rummaged through the cart. Should we do the same? She shook her head, then paused. You all stayed outside the walls. You're fine, but Tavin... You could take him upstream, Violet said, to be safe. Can't pick up aught from sharing our water that way. Bod fired off a wink with all the subtlety of a rock to the head. Aye, much safer. So Fi shot her a dirty look, yada yada yada, skipping down a little bit further. Even now, Tavin looked taken aback, swinging a pack down. Then he caught Bod's renewed, furious winking.
I just imagine, I'm gonna say this for you guys, I just see you like...
Yeah. Yes, that would be safer. So Corporal Lakima's like, we'll set up camp, whatever. Coda paused to Fi's surprise, looking from her to Tavin. If it's just the two of you, is that, safe?
Fi buried her burning face in her hands.
I think we've established everyone's going to be safe, Tavin said repeatedly. Coda looked annoyed. I meant with the skin gas.
I can assure you of my personal commitment to Fi's safety, and I suspect she'll be ensuring mine as well. And I'd like to leave it at that before we ruin the word safe any more than we already have. Tavin started toward the riverbank, then stopped, mouth twisting. Where are we going again? Somewhere safe. Fi mumbled into her palms.
And like, we love these comedic moments.
Mm-hmm.
We love it. But now that we have Fi and Tavin alone, we're going to have a much more serious scene of talking about Saramir's death and how the only bad thing was that Jasimir did not get to say goodbye to his father. And then
Tavin is not broken up.
Oh, not at all. He's like, oh, thank God he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But then Fi is really upset because she just had to do all this stuff, and they wash up, and they have this really touching moment where Tavin starts crying.
Well, they finally wash up, and, like, Fi has been like, do not touch me until we've both washed up, and it's been agonizing for Fi. Like, they touch hands for, like, a second, and she's like, I have to go underwater before I actually catch on fire.
Yes.
But they just, like, hug in the river there for a minute, and
Tavin's crying.
The boy she loved was crying. And he can't even get the words out to tell her what happened.
So Fi says, let me see, and he opens his mouth so she can touch his tooth and see what he saw, and she sees him finding her bag in a burning band of crows. So he thinks that she is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Vimo's there going, you're wrong, like, dude, she's fine, we need to keep going.
But, like, there were several minutes where he thought she died.
And he just kept reliving that horror until he found her. And even then, he didn't always believe it.
Mm-hmm. Until he saw her again.
And was, like, physically holding her.
And even after Vimo, this is page 98, even after Vimo shook him from his screaming after she told him that wasn't Fi lying dead in the burning grass, that his chief was still alive, it didn't mend what had been broken. I just like the choice of his chief.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Well, his chief, her hawk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
And then we have a little sex scene going on again. This one is much less explicit than the last one. Not that the last one was explicit.
They're definitely having sex.
There's no mistaking it. And then we head into Jazimir's procession. And there are issues there. Are we surprised for a second that the other hawks are like, ew, no.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, Tavin, you ran away. Why should we let you in with these other people? And this hawk doesn't know that Tavin is the king's son, or even Draga's son.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, why should we let a bastard through? Sorry.
Well, you see.
Fine, I'll order you. Let the crows in, Tavin snapped. The lieutenant drew himself up. You'll have to remind me, where does bastard fall in the chain of command?
Page 103.
Yes. Fi bristled on Tavin's behalf. Think it's well above dung-sucking dog lover, so I wager he outranks you. Corporal Lakima abruptly coughed into her elbow. So did a few of the hawks on the line. The lieutenant, however, was not amused.
You're addressing your betters, bone thief, he snarled. I could have you flogged. Tavin stepped in front of Fi, eyes burning. Touch a hair on her head, and you'll lose your hand. Behind them, Vimo cackled. Love this. Keep it up, lads. This is the most fun I've had in weeks. Like,
that's me.
Girl.
This is me.
Don't do it. To which Fi returns. Shove it, turncoat, she calls back. We're entering the camp with or without your permission. And then...
Can we all please stop posturing for 1 minute? Fi heard Koda mutter under his breath. Is there a problem here? A familiar voice called from behind the lieutenant.
And it's Jazimir.
Jazimir, he's back! My son! He is here! Hello, boy.
No, Your Highness, the lieutenant said quick. These crows were looking for a place to set up camp. They will be quartered next to me, Jazimir said, icy calm. In the future, I expect my guests to be given significantly less trouble. You tell him, Jazimir!
Mm-hmm.
Yes!
I want to talk about a couple things on this page.
I know what you want to talk about.
I'm going to talk about something later down the page, but I want to start at the top. So this is page 104. When Fi had first met him, meaning Jazimir, 3 moons before, he'd been fussy, naive, and principled to a fault. If she'd been a thief, she could have emptied his pockets 5 ways in 4 heartbeats and convinced him it was all for the greater good.
Yes.
Which is very, Vanya from Little Thieves energy. I just want to throw that out there. Which is Margaret Owen's other book. Perhaps it had been the time spent with his aunt, or with Fi, or the loss of his father, but the prince Fi saw now was no longer one painlessly crossed. Good for him.
He's really grown up. In 3 months.
But anyway, Jazzmere comes and gets them out of this trouble. They let them into the camp. And the minute
Jasmire's, like, able to look at the crows.
Yeah. First of all, he kind of gives, like, Vi, like, a pat on the shoulder, kind of. Like, they don't really hug. They're not really huggers, but, like, it's just kind of like a pat.
Like, my friend, you're here!
I'm happy you're not
Smack.
dead.
I'm glad you're not dead. Yes. But then he looks at the band of crows and he's like, where's your father? And for a minute, he kind of fears the worst.
I like what Fi says about Pa. She goes, oh, he's fine. He's a shrine keeper now, safe and sound and bored brainless to the end of his days.
Then she connected why he'd noticed. I'm sorry about the king. And Jazzmere says, he shook his head rueful. You don't have to pretend for my sake. But I just want to point this out here. Jazzmere specifically looks for Pa, for Fi's father. And there is part of it that, like, he's so stuck thinking about the absence of his own father that, like, he's noticing the absence of fathers, like, in general. My reading of this scene is, I think he was looking for Pa specifically. I think he kind of started to see Pa as a father figure to him, as someone who treated him with dignity without having these grand expectations of him. Like, Pa had expectations of him, like he expected anything of his other girls. We talked about that in the last episode. But I think here, like, this is the first time Jazzmere has really had, like, a positive male role model in his life, and I think he was kind of looking for that comfort or support from this person that he began to look up to. I would argue Jazzmere learned more about leading as a king from Pa than he learned from his own father.
Hands down. Hands down.
Like, in the few weeks that he spent with that band of crows, he learned much more than he ever learned in his lifetime in the palace.
Yes. I think that the only thing that his parental units, his parents, really taught him was the politics of it, but not the leadership of it.
Not the character.
Yes. And Pa taught him the character part.
Yes. I just want to give Jazzmere a hug.
I want to give them all a hug.
He's kind of a sad boy in this book, but, like, understandably.
I would say very understandably, because his dad just died, and even though your parents can be terrible people, that doesn't mean that you are not affected by their death in the end.
I think sometimes, and I can't speak from experience in this situation, but I think sometimes, based on what I've heard other people tell me, sometimes you mourn not so much the loss of the person, but the loss of what that relationship could have been.
100%.
And it's not so much that, like, Jazzmere recognizes his father was terrible, but I think he always hoped that one day things could change. And now he doesn't have that opportunity anymore, and that is painful for him.
Yeah. But now we are part of Jazzmere's procession, and Fi is staying with Tavin. Surprise, surprise. And
make sure to turn out the lamp.
Everybody thinks, like, oh, you know, the Hawks are going to go about their way now, and, like, the band is going to be safe. But Fi's Hawks don't leave her people at all. Like, they stay with the band, and they are almost on higher guard, surrounded by their Hawk friends than when they were on the road. And Lakima is even like, I'm not leaving them. Like, you don't have to worry. I won't let anyone hurt them.
Yep. This is also where we find out what Coda's been up to.
Dun dun dun! dun! Leah, do you want to talk about Coda?
Yeah, I want to read something. It's on page 105. So I think it's like Lakima, Fi, and Jazz
and Tavin
all talking to the steward that's there.
Burzo.
Thank you. I couldn't find his name. And kind of towards the bottom, it says something very peculiar happened then, and it happened very fast. Fi heard the clatter of a spear dropping, saw a blur of leather armor and dark hair, stumbled as it passed between her and Tavin. Then the next thing she knew, Coda was trying to wrench the steward's arm behind his back. And I'm like, reading that, I was like, what in the, what?
What has happened?
What just happened? Like, what is going on with Coda? What's going on with the steward? Like, I'm confused. But then we realize, one, Coda's got a secret thing going on.
First of all, Tavin thinks that Coda is crushing on Fi.
Yeah, Tavin's a little jealous if you get that, and I'm just like, Tavin, jealousy does not suit you.
It's okay. It's okay. No
Fi
worries.
thinks it's kind of funny, though.
Fi thinks it's hilarious, because Fi's like, I have zero interest
I don't care about
in
him.
Coda.
But we figure out that Coda is a black swan?
Mm-hmm.
Which is basically a spy. Like, he knows all of the secrets of everything. And he basically keeps, him and his people, the other black swans, keep the country running. Like, they keep things from, like, completely getting destroyed by other people.
And Tavin is the one who reveals this. Coda touches Tavin, and Tavin, being a hawk witch, is like, ha, you're not a hawk.
Tavin
you're a swan.
Can read casts
based on blood.
Just by a touch.
Like reading someone's bloodline, basically.
Yes. Which brings up a point that I pointed out to Maggie. I don't know if I brought this up to Leah. That means that Tavin has never touched another hawk, at least another hawk witch, because they would have felt his phoenix ancestry.
Mm-hmm. So he's probably a little bit touch-starved.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
But, like, isn't that really sad, actually?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. But I think that's really cool that, like, Tavin, one, can read that in a person just from one touch.
Oh, yeah.
And with Coda, I think Coda is such an interesting character because he's posing as a hawk, but he's not.
Right.
No one knew that he wasn't a hawk. Like, it's crazy how...
Not even his commanding officer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, well, what makes me question how long he's been pretending to.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he had to go down 3 levels because he is a swan, so he can manipulate desire. Right?
Right.
So he went down to a hawk, which is the blood, but I almost would have thought that he would have been a peacock because he could then perform a glamour, or maybe even a pigeon or a sparrow with love or refuge, but no. Swans.
Mm-hmm.
Swans. So we're now in the camp. Coda's in prison, air quotes around prison.
They're trying to get some answers out of him.
And
Fi's like, I don't got time for this, and like pulls out one of her crane witch teeth.
And is like, tell me the truth.
Basically yank the truth out of him. And Coda is a slippery fellow.
He is literally described, like, trying to figure out what his truth is described as touching eels.
Yes.
Gross.
Nasty.
Draga says, this is why I hate spies.
Yeah.
Again,
Draga just gives the whole, like, I'm a tired single mother, and she only has one child. Yeah. And many spouses.
Yeah. But still.
I love her.
I know you do.
But Tavin's still, like, upset because he is like, Coda, you could have hurt Fi, like, you can't like her, and Fi's just like, dude, my boy's a himbo. I see it now.
Mm-hmm. Wait, what page is that on?
It's 109. Because he's just, like, picking people up left and right, and Fi's like, no, like, sweetie, calm down, it's okay. It's okay, honey.
It's okay.
It's all good.
It's okay. And then the Master General's just like, can you not, please? Like, please. Can you not? And so we have this whole conversation, and then Fi has to go to dinner with, like, the local lord, and Jasimir and Tavin and the Master General. So Lakima's staying with the crows and all this stuff, and while they're having this dinner, the queen has control of the mammoth rider caretaker and manipulates him into killing the mammoths. So she now has control of the mammoths and has control of all of the hawk army, minus the hawks that were traveling with the band but now she's getting their hairs.
Mm-hmm. She needs their hair to control them.
Yes, or some part of their body.
Yeah.
Hair is the easiest one, but we also have instances of skin being used.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's gross. So we have this conversation with the queen, and she's trying to convince Jasimir to, like, join her side and do all of this stuff, and she can't convince Jasimir to do that.
Jasimir spits in her face.
Literally.
Good for him.
Yes, and, like, Jasimir grew a backbone, and I'm so proud of him, and I love him.
We're proud.
And so she's like, okay, whatever, I'll turn to Tavin. And she starts targeting Tavin by essentially saying, like, hey, if you join my side, like, I won't hurt Fi.
That's not what she promises, actually. She gives Tavin the same offer, and Tavin reluctantly agrees and says no harm comes to Fi. And Rosanna's like, okay, sure, whatever. She can be here. You can come visit her anytime you want. I was like, that's creepy. Of course, Jasimir and Fi are both ready to throw hands with Tavin. Understandably.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
Me too.
Like,
what?
let's fight.
Bro, not cool. Switching sides?
Mm-hmm.
So
I know a lot of things on that page, but we can just keep
Oh,
talking.
yeah. Fi's obviously upset, and the queen is like, go ahead, take her out, take her back to the crows, hide her in this castle, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then she whispers, drown her to the hawks that have controlled her. So Fi is about to get murdered, and all this stuff happens, and then all of a sudden we have Lakima come up and is like, hey, go, run away, she's trying to control me, I'm doing the best I can to resist her,
She
but
can't make me hurt you, is what Lakima says.
which means that there is no part of Lakima that wants to hurt the crows, her crow band. So, like, talk about character growth.
Yes.
Talk about character growth. But that doesn't mean that she can't find another part of Lakima's desires that she can manipulate into then hurting the crows.
Right.
So that's why Lakima's like, you need to get out of here. I am not going to look at you, because she can see through my eyes. Like, get out of here. Mm-hmm. You have to go.
Tell your father I kept my promise.
Oh. And the last thing we see is Lakima's back as a, like, horde of people are coming at her and the crows, and she's going to hold back the people so the crows can get away. Okay, so we have just left
Part 2, baby!
Yes, we've just left the thing.
The thing.
The
camp?
The procession.
Procession.
That's the word we were going for.
It is a camp.
And the crows are asking Fi, like, where are we going? Where are we going? And Fi's like, haha, I'm not going to tell you just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And she's burning
teeth. Like, out the wazoo.
Mm-hmm. Because she's trying to keep them hidden from the people who are naturally going to start tracking them and chasing them. Because Lakima can only hold them off for so long.
Right. And eventually the crows figure out where she is leading them, and she is leading them back to Pa. And at one point, Fi stumbles and can't keep going, and she realizes that somebody has essentially slung her up. Like, they have put her in a sling, and the group is like, it is our turn to carry you.
She reckoned no one in her band knew how Tavin had carried her when she'd burned herself out in the Merovar.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they take her to Genmara's shrine.
Yes. And the very first thing she says to Pa is that Lakima kept her word. Mm-hmm. And then she passes out again. Pa passes out a lot.
She's pushing herself pretty hard, so, like, understandable.
And when she comes to, she realizes where she is, and then Wretch and Bod come and find her, and she is distraught. Like, she is sobbing uncontrollably, and the two women are there for her, like, just existing in her presence, and, like, saying, you can't do this alone, you can't carry this burden alone, like, share it with us. Share the load. Lord of the Rings.
Thank you.
Share the load.
And Fi's upset because Tavin has turned his back on them, and Wretch is like, loving someone doesn't make them choose right for us or for them.
It's like your thing. I don't know what you call it. They always choose the wrong.
Oh, your moral compass
the moral
on the
compass.
wrong side.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, like, Fi is, I think this also leads to some self-doubt in Fi. That she takes this, I think in some sense, at some level, she takes this as Fi not believing she's enough. Or as Tavin not believing she's enough.
Right.
Yeah, because she's like, if Tavin really believed that we could do this, he would not have betrayed us, but he took an easy way out, which means he has no faith in me.
I think she almost likens him to Hangdog.
Yeah. Oof.
Which says a whole lot, because she slept with both of them.
Oof. Moving along. Also, in this scene, we learn Fi's mother's name, which I just wanted to mention.
Stealthy.
Yeah. Because Fi is blaming herself for what happened. She's saying, I should have known this was happening. I've let my band down.
Mm-hmm.
And Pa basically gives her a pep talk, and he says, we're all making mistakes. And this is where we kind of learn Pa's fatal flaw, quote unquote, that Rachel mentioned earlier, where he says, like, Rachel mentioned that Pa is always giving, and that comes with a price.
Yeah.
And the reason that Fi's mother was killed by the Oleanders is because when a raid came, she was still lifting Fi up into the tree, because Fi was a baby.
Yeah.
And she was handing Fi off to Swain.
She was like a toddler.
Yeah,
So she couldn't climb the trees, but
yes.
she could
She
has memories of her mother.
Right. And her mother couldn't get up the trees in time, and that's why she was killed.
Yeah.
And Pa says, and Fi's like, well, Pa, that's not your fault. Like, that's the Oleanders, they killed her. And Pa says, yeah, but I should have thought ahead. I should have thought we should have had a sling for you to be carried, and we should have planned better for this. And
he doesn't even say we should have. He says I should have.
Mm-hmm. We're supposed to look after our own, but I fouled up, is what he says. And I liked that we got to see that humanness of him, and that
he is flawed.
Mm-hmm. And that, I think that does comfort Fi in a way.
Oh, yeah.
She's always looked up to him as like this almost supernatural, as we all look up to our parents in some ways, right?
And Fi has never once blamed her dad for the death of her mother.
Right.
I do want to backtrack just real fast to 138 when it's still Bod and Wretch, and Fi says, I'm the chief, I'm supposed to be taking care of you. You think that's how it works? Bod scolded and tore off a strip of pan bread. We look after our own. That didn't stop when you became our chief. You're the cleverest, meanest chief on the road, and we'll follow you straight into the 12 hells if you ask. But if you fall, we carry you. If you're sick, we carry you. If you need us, we carry you. And I swear on Varlet's head that if you don't take care of yourself, we will make you.
I like that line, but I just want to point out that Bod does not swear on herself, but she swears on her brother, which I think is hilarious. Like, that's true chaotic sibling energy right there.
I thought I said it wrong, and I was like, did I say something wrong?
No, you said it perfectly. You were perfect, my friend.
And right after that, they're shoving food into Fi's face.
Which is a very, like, that just feels like a very family, like
you will eat,
you
so help me,
food.
dead gods. Like, if you don't eat, I will literally shove this down your gullet.
This is going into your body somehow.
Voluntarily or not, this is going in your mouth.
Yes.
And, like, we love that.
Mm-hmm.
We're here for that. That chaotic caring.
Coda comes back.
What?
I have issues with him, but it's fine.
Oh, I still love him.
Leah's over here. Coda can do no wrong.
And I'm like, Coda is wrong.
He is sometimes wrong.
Sometimes he is wrong.
Coda, we learned that Coda gives off also tired single parent energy.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
In a different way than Draga does.
In a very different way than Draga. Because Draga's just, like, resigned to the fact.
Mm-hmm. Coda is still trying to herd the cats.
Yes. Draga is the equivalent of the depressed single parent, and Coda is the equivalent of the anxious single parent.
Yeah.
I agree.
That checks. Coda comes back and he's got a plan.
And the plan is to take Fi to the palace.
Mm-hmm.
With Vimo, too. Vimo is
Yes.
also with Coda.
And
Which,
the way they convince Fi to join the plan, Vimo says, the first step is something you'll really like. And it turns out the thing that it starts with is Vimo being arrested.
Yes. Which,
and
like...
Fi does really like, in fact.
We're here for that.
This is also, oh, and they bring Barf with them. Barf the cat comes with
Yes.
them. Because Pa thinks the cat is good luck, and he is correct.
He is very correct. We love this.
But, we learned something about Tavin in the next chapter. Or not about Tavin, I'm sorry, about Coda. I'm really messing up my names tonight.
Yes.
Page 163.
Yes. And there won't be a distraction for you, his handler asked pointedly.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
You're looking at me expectantly.
Do you want me to read it?
I'll read it.
You brought it up.
Coda coughed. Women typically aren't. Fi raised her eyebrows, but said not. She couldn't help thinking Tavin would have been less thorny with Coda if he'd known.
I'm so glad you said that correctly, because in my head I was like, please don't say horny. Please don't say horny.
I mean, maybe.
So we're essentially at the palace. Vimo's been taken prisoner. That's how Fi and Coda were able to sneak in. And now they are going to be these spies within the palace. And their first task is to find Jazzmere.
Mm-hmm. And Fi finds him almost immediately. She uses one of her pigeon witch teeth for good luck.
Yeah.
And also Barf helps because she finds out Barf is in fact good luck. I also want to point out, I don't know if I said this to you, Rachel, but the way that the luck works in this scene is very reminiscent to how fortune works in Little Thieves.
Yes.
To how Vanya sees, like, the goddess of
very much
fortune.
So.
But that's just a whole tangent.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I like seeing those connections. So we find Jazzmere. We can't do anything with Jazzmere yet.
Because Tavin is talking to Jazzmere.
Mm-hmm.
And Tavin then hears somebody coming down the stairs, somebody thinking it's supposed to be the servant bringing Jazzmere food.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which they were supposed to be doing.
Right. But
until Faya interrupted them.
Right. So now Fi is racing up the runway, right, the stairwell, and throws her slipper at Barf, who's licking up the soup.
That was settled. She's like, Barf!
Right, because Fi is like, if Tavin sees Barf, like, he's gonna know that I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
So she throws her slipper at the cat, and then runs behind a statue and transforms into Niemi.
Yeah, Niemi from the
very beginning. Yeah,
that
she takes on her appearance
and tries to play it off.
Yes. And Tavin apparently falls for it.
Yes.
But now we know where Jazzmere is, and
yes,
there's some like flirting between. Well, first of all, neither Fi nor Tavin are who they appear to be. Tavin has taken on Jazzmere's appearance, and Fi has taken on Niemi's. And so, yeah, that's something. But they end up kind of flirting with each other a little bit. Or Tavin as Jazzmere is flirting with Niemi.
Yes, and this is where my confession comes in. Because this is as far as I have read up on this reread.
Oh, no.
Rachel! Well, now I'm the expert. Rachel's been kicked off the podcast.
That is baloney. I have still read it more times than you have.
Well, anyway. Fi is angry, and I am angry.
Rightfully so.
She's like, dude, I haven't even been gone, like, 2 days, and you're already, like, thirsting after some other girl?
Right,
what the
like,
heck?
Go away.
So she's angry, and I respect that.
Men are stupid, and I don't respect them.
She also gets a jab back at Tavin, though. Like, she makes him kind of like, oh, you must be so upset that the king is dead. And she knows it's going to hurt him. And I was like, you know what? It's cruel, but I respect that.
He deserves it.
So, we do free Jazzmere from the prison. Well, actually...
There's a lot that happens.
There's a lot that's going on here. Fi goes back, right?
Tells Coda, communicates it to Vimo, all this stuff.
And then she goes back to find Jazzmere again and, like, get a closer look at the cell.
We are going to save you.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to need a little help because we don't know how to get you out of here.
But my favorite interaction between them is she finds Jazzmere in his cell.
What page?
Page 188.
Mm-hmm.
The prince bit his lip and nodded, eyes glistening wet in the lamplight. He also cries. A lot of the men cry in these books, and I really appreciate that.
I agree.
Not in, like, a sadistic way, in, like, a men have emotions way. I digress. He held out a hand through the bars. "We still have an oath to keep," he said, hoarse. "We'll make them pay." Fi clasped it hard and fierce. "We'll burn it down." Which is an echo of what they said in the first book, but I just love this, like, I love that image of them, like, shaking hands through the prison cell, where their roles are almost reversed, right?
The power dynamic is reversed.
Fi is the one who's free, and Jazzmere is not, and yet they are both like, we are on the same side, and we are going to end this together.
Well, something else that I want to point out is just right before this, she's super worried that Jazzmere isn't going to want to see her, isn't going to want to talk to her, because he's going to feel that same betrayal because she ran away with the crows.
Right.
And he is so relieved when he sees her, right? Like, he has this, oh my gosh, you survived, like, you are okay.
He says to her, "You're all I have left if I lose you too." Like, he's lost his mother, his father, his aunt. Like, she's under Rusana's control.
And he's like, I'm done with Tavin because he betrayed me. I'm not dealing with him.
I really love Jazzmere.
Jazzmere has grown so much from the beginning of the first book to even the middle of this book.
Yeah. And a lot of it does happen off camera, but off camera, so to speak, but it makes sense. Like, we see the starts of that at the end of The Merciful Crow, and we see them come to fruition in this book.
Yes. And I almost think that Jazzmere is my favorite character in The Faithless Hawk.
I would agree with that. That is a strong agree from me.
He's pretty high up there.
Who's your favorite?
I don't know. Coda's up there, man.
But we like Coda because Coda likes Jazzmere.
Yeah.
No, we like Coda because Jazzmere likes Coda.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. Get with the program.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Which, now's a good time as any to talk about that.
No, because we haven't even released him from prison yet.
Oh, well, he gets freed from prison.
Yes, but they do it by interrupting the coronation of Rusana and, air quote, Jazzmere, actually Tavin.
Yeah, Fi causes some chaos with her phoenix teeth.
Some?
Just
kind of.
She causes all of the chaos.
Yes, sends some omens of doom during the coronation and all kinds of good stuff.
Right. And using that commotion, they then get Jazzmere out of the prison. But then Fi also fools. Fi then follows Tavin back to the royal quarters and is kind of wanting to kill him, but it's fine. Who wouldn't? And instead discovers the hair and skin room of Rusiana, and like,
it's a room completely full of hair from different people all over.
Every surface is covered in hair and skin, and it is
there's stuff hanging off the ceiling too.
Yeah, every surface is covered.
So that's a no thank you from all three of us.
That is
and Fi sets it on fire, which I would
say
done.
that is a 12 hells no from all of us.
Agreed.
And she found her phoenix teeth.
Yeah.
In
she
that
takes
room.
her teeth back.
She takes her teeth back, sets everything on fire, and leaves.
And then she gets back and Coda's like, "So do you want to tell me why the royal quarters are on fire?"
Fi's like, "No, not really.
I'm good. I'll leave it."
I love it. Okay.
It's not that relevant.
So we have interrupted the coronation. So Jazzmere is now with them. Tavin has now started kind of courting Fi's version of Nami. And the court is kind of starting to whisper because Jazzmere has never been into women. Our boy is fruity. And we love him. But
as Jazzmere puts it, I had opportunities to be interested in women. I was not.
Yes. So Jazzmere is now, the actual Jazzmere is now also living as a servant with Fi and Coda. And Coda and Jazzmere kind of start to have this thing where they have issues kind of openly communicating with each other.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And they kind of like to defy each other, where, like, Coda's like, I really want to tell the prince he's wrong, but I can't because he's the prince. And Jazzmere is like, I dare you to tell me I'm wrong. So there's this, like, cute dynamic between the two of them. Spoiler alert, they like each other.
Wow, I am so surprised.
I know, I'm so shocked. But because Phi's Niamey is now kind of being courted by Tavin's Jazzmere, she's getting invited to all of these events, and she kind of crosses the queen at one point, and the queen tells Tavin's Jazzmere to take Phi's Niamey to the western end for a visit. And in that western end, there is this well called the Well of Grace, which is used as a murder torture mechanism for the higher castes.
It's a big pool of water, you drop people in, and they can't get out, and they just drown there from exhaustion.
So the entire thing is filled with bones. So not only is Phi, like, feeling overwhelmed because she's supposed to die.
Because bones.
But then she's also feeling the magic of the bones, right? Because she can sense that magic of bones and skeletons.
And there's another reason that we'll find out later.
Yes, there is. So this is all happening, and then continuing on with the courtship, like, there is this, Tavin's Jazzmere.
Tavin's Jazzmere wants to make it up to Niamey for the,
visit to the well.
The torture well. Phi talks it over with Jazzmere and Coda, and they're like, well, what are you going to do about this? And Phi's like, I have an idea. And,
because they've been hearing these rumors of sparrows going missing after they have served the queen in some way, and one of them talked about how they went into the catacombs, but doesn't remember what happened there. So Phi wants to get to the palace catacombs. Page
260.
Thank you.
I'll admit it again, Tavin said. This is not what I had in mind.
I like how we hear Niamey in Phi's head, and she's like, a fern could flirt better than that. And, like, she is constantly insulting Phi.
But I do like this scene. Tavin had gone first, headed down the steps to a set of heavy-looking bronze doors, a ring of keys swinging from his fingers. She, Phi, leaned closer to the back of his neck and breathed, and you said you had a lot to show me. Tavin dropped his keys with a clatter. He croaked. That's fair. And I'm like, Tavin, it's like you've never been hit on before. Come on, man. Like, get your crap together. This is the same thing that happened in the Crow Shrine in the last book.
Seriously, like, get your stuff together,
come
dude.
On, Tavin.
So they are...
Niamey approves of that tactic, by the way.
Yes.
She says, good job, you might land as a prince after all.
Yes. So they start kind of walking through, they talk about all the different areas of the catacombs.
Very romantic.
Obviously. Okay, for some of us that might be a romantic escapade, so I don't want to hear it.
No comment.
Okay, but, like, the French catacombs...
That's why we were talking about the cemeteries.
Like, going to see the French catacombs? Yes. Am I going to make out in the French catacombs? No.
Not that she would tell us, at least.
No, because I need to keep my eyes on all the skeletons.
It's like keep your eyes on all of them.
All of them at the same time.
Constant swivel. Stay where you are,
don't move. It's like me around taxidermy, right?
Okay, got you.
So, for some of us, that would be a little romantic escapade.
Well, point being, there's a whole frick ton of bones down here, and as we've talked about with the Well of Grace, bones affect Phi, and Phi's not feeling super great down here with all the bones. It's kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Kind of like a sensory overload moment, almost,
100%,
actually.
yeah. So they
have a moment in the catacombs.
They make out. They don't have sex. This is not a sex scene. This is, however, a make-out session that then ends with Phi passing out!
First of all, I don't want to say it's just anywhere in the catacombs. It is on the tomb of one of their dead queens.
Ambra.
I say.
We debated that name, too.
What do you say, Leah?
I say Ambra.
Ambra? Okay.
Ambra.
It's on the tomb of Queen Ambra, who is, like, one of the most well-known and beloved queens of Sabor. She's very important, but anyway. They find her skeleton in a casket there, and
Fi touches the bones and has these memory flashbacks. Which we only get bits and pieces of.
While she's kissing Tavin,
Yes.
you hear, like, his
voice, because they touch teeth.
Yeah, so he's, in his head, he's saying, just don't look at her face. You can do this, just don't look.
What page?
265.
Okay.
And it's like, oh my goodness, she's got so much going on in her head right now.
And now she got his voice and Yemi's voice and the bones
and Ambra and
there's just so much going on.
Poor Fi.
Poor Fi. And then she passes out. And that is the end of Part 2.
Getting to Part 3. Tavin has brought her out of the catacombs. She goes back eventually to, they have a little bit of a moment, but, like, we can skim over that. She eventually goes back to Coda and Jasmine and is like, hey, something weird happened, and I don't just mean, like, I was making out with my kind of ex.
Emphasis on the kind of part.
Yes, it's complicated. That is their relationship status. And she tells them, like, she's like, I think I might be Ambra reborn.
And Coda's like, no. No.
No, Coda knows that
I know, but he's like,
And Five just kind of looks at him and she's like,
yeah.
What do you know?
So then the person who I think takes the information the best is Jasimir.
Yeah.
And Jasimir's like, oh, in that case, you're supposed to rule.
You're supposed to, like, be in charge of all of this.
Yeah, like, I'm cool with washing my hands of this. Peace.
Coda's just, Five's, like, angry that Coda knew this whole time and didn't tell her, and Coda's like, what would it change? And Jasimir's just like, what would it change? It changes everything.
Yeah. I like what Coda says, because he's getting angry. Like, everybody's angry at this point.
Everyone is upset.
On 278. And Coda goes, it's not about having the right to the throne, which is what Jasimir had just said. It's about being right for the throne. To which Jasimir responds with, my father abused his power in every way imaginable just to prove he could. And your all-knowing black swans did nothing to stop him because you thought he was good enough for the throne.
I said, you tell him, Jasimir. I also just like this moment of Jasimir using his power to defend Fi and the crows.
Yes.
Like, good allyship there, Jazz.
And then going on with our Fi is violent, she goes, I'm going to scalp the next person who says throne.
Good for her.
Yes.
Kind of jumping back a little bit. Just right before the Part 3 starts, we find out that what oath she's supposed to keep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Which is important.
We are led to assume the entire time that she is supposed to be keeping the oath that she originally cut with Jasimir.
Right.
But in reality, she's supposed to be keeping Ambra's. Leah, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. Just like right before Part 3 starts, she goes through several memories, and she's realizing that Ambra has an oath with the Covenant, and she didn't keep it in all her lives up until Fi. Like, each time she's been failing at it, or like something has come up where she couldn't fulfill that oath.
And this oath is the reason the crows have lost their birthright.
Yeah.
We don't actually know what the oath is. Not overtly.
Yeah.
Because Fi is kind of in and out of
consciousness.
And Ambra's memories. So they're all angry with each other and whatever. And we are still going out on missions, but, people in the palace start going missing. And let's try that again. There are people who are suffering from the Sinner's Plague. They were taken to the quarantine hut, and the next thing you know, they're all gone. And everybody's like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand what is happening. So Jasimir and Fi end up going on this little excursion.
I want to read something from this, because Coda has gone off and left Fi and Jasimir unsupervised, and they are chaos friends, and they
are chaos siblings.
They are chaos siblings.
What page are we on?
Page 293. Jasmine says, like, almost the minute Coda leaves the room, and Jasmine looks at Fi and goes, "What are your thoughts on breaking into the royal quarters?" And Fi chokes on her food. She says, "What happened to Prince?" Fi fluttered her hands, warbled her voice, and mummed dewy-eyed dismay. "Oh no, we can't! It's the law!" And Jasmine replies, "First of all, we can't, it's the law. It's not the wildly unreasonable statement you're pretending it is. Second, you know what happened. You were there for most of it. Do you want to do it or not?" And the way that they break in is with cats, which is perfect.
It's very on brand.
Yeah, it's very on brand.
But while they're there, they break into Jasimir's mother's room and find out that it's kind of been this holding place.
Yeah.
Right? Or was it Jasimir's old bedroom?
Jasimir's old bedroom is...
The queen's old bedroom is the skin room. The hair and skin room. His old room, is the room that she, like, plans everything. And here we see a map with all of the crow shines
tacked out,
marked. And the next thing we know, Jasimir and Fi are in there moving the tacks, looking at the paperwork, and seeing that it's all about dismantling the crow network.
Basically, Rusana is planning a genocide. That is what 100%. I wrote down here. Like, she has found all of their hiding places. She's scaring them into going into hiding, and then they're going to go to their hiding places and kill them all. And I don't say that I don't mean for my tone to sound light when I say that. Cause I'm just... Yeah. Because that's a horrible, horrible thing. Right. On top of the many horrible, horrible things that have already happened.
It very much is reminiscent of the Esther story. Do you know where I'm going with this? Of What's-His-Face going to the other What's-His-Face and being like, we should kill all the Jews. And then Esther becomes queen and she's like, hey, if you do that, you're gonna kill me too. Right? That just, this whole scene reminds me a lot of that plotting where the king is like, yeah, sure, whatever, and the real bad guy is somebody else. Right? But as Jasimir and Fi are in this room, they hear Tavin and the queen coming, so they hurry and go over to the windowsill. Leah.
Right before that, Jasimir is writing out, he's copying parchment because there's a stack of these, like, orders from the queen that need to be signed by him, saying that the gentry can have free reign.
Murder whoever they want.
And there's some other things in there, so he's making another copy of something.
Essentially saying the crows can protect themselves.
Yeah. So then he hides his parchment underneath that stack.
Because in order for these to become law, Tavin pretending to be Jasimir, Rusiana, and the Master General all need to sign the papers. But after that happens, they go hide on the windowsill, and the Queen and Tavin walk in, and they start having this conversation. One of my favorite lines comes from Tavin, because he doesn't really want to be working with the Queen. He's just doing it anyway, for reasons. And the Queen says something, and Tavin goes, fine, I'll bite. What childhood trauma do you think justifies mass murder? Like, yes, you tell him, I am here for you. I am here for you. And she's like, eh.
She doesn't really give him an answer.
No, not at all. So...
Moving right along.
Moving on. The part we really want to talk about in regards to the windowsill.
Window seat.
Still.
It is more than a windowsill.
Oh my goodness. So, Tavin and Rusana sign the papers.
And they leave, and then Fi and Jasimir go back. And Coda's like, hey, where were you guys?
Right.
And they tell him what happened. Fi says, granted, if they'd gone near the window seat, they'd have found us. But they didn't, and we're all the better for it. I'm on page 305. Continue, Rachel.
Coda cocked an eyebrow. I've heard stories about the prince in that window seat. Please, no. Jasimir covered half his face with his hand. Vi stared at him both delighted and weary. What kind of stories? Coda shook his head, his smirk making the red lines on his face look all the more like whiskers, and gestured to the prince. Jasimir let out a long sigh. may have engaged in certain activities for the first time on that window seat last year. Coda coughed. And I was not aware Father would have been giving a tour of the private gardens to the new ambassadors. I recalled the lovely view the study had had of those very gardens. The windows were crystal, not glass black. That view definitely went 2 ways. She let out a gleefully outraged cackle. You rolled your first lad on those cushions? Why didn't you say anything? What with all the mass murder plotting, it didn't seem like the time. Just the chaos siblingness. Jasimir's cheeks flushed darker. Besides, he was my language tutor, and Father had dismissed him by the end of the day. So it only happened the once. He's our age and very charming, so I'm sure he had no trouble finding someone new. I'd rather we all forget about it.
The tutor certainly didn't. Coda swung the orange tomcat off his shoulders and set him on the ground. Come on, Jazzifer. You're not calling him Jazzifer, the prince said immediately. His name is Mango. That's the objection, Fi muttered. Coda and Jasimir didn't seem to hear, embroiled in impassioned debate. She noted with interest that the flush on Jasimir's cheeks still lingered. Coda might not have been her type, but she could hardly fault the prince for his tastes when she just watched her last lover sign death warrants for her kin.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Here for it.
I like how Fi's just like, he has questionable taste in men, but like, I can't blame him.
But so do I.
But so do I.
And then they go visit Master General Draga.
Now that the hair has burned, they take a chance and they go to see Draga, assuming that she's not under Rusana's control anymore.
Yes. Praying that she's not under
And
control
she's
anymore.
not.
And she's not. Miraculously, she's not.
And they come up with a plan.
And it's not necessarily a good plan, but a plan is better than no plan.
Indeed. It starts with a party before a pre-ball party.
Yes.
In which Tavin as Jasimir has brought Niemi as Fi as Niemi as his date.
Mm-hmm.
And they're chatting and talking, and then all of a sudden Rusana summons both of them. She sends a servant to summon them. She sends a servant to summon them, and Tavin says, "Oh no, he says, Niemi wasn't feeling well. This is my friend, somebody else." And Fi's like, "Why is he defending me? Like, something's not adding up here." And as he walks away, Tavin unwound, this is page 322. Tavin unwound his arm from Fi's and turned to her. "I'll see you in the Hall of Dawn," Fi blurted out. "In 15 minutes, right?" He raised a hand that trembled and briefly, lightly touched her face, gazing at her as if to memorize every scrap of this moment. It made Fi want to scream. Then he leaned in to plant a kiss on her cheek. His lips moved against her skin, breathing barely loud enough to hear. "Yes, Chief." He pulled back, spun on a heel, and left her standing in the garden as the Queen's man pulled the door between them closed. And we're all sitting here like, yes, Leah.
I love it! Oh my goodness, he knew all along.
Oh, he knew.
And we take a little walk down memory lane in the next chapter.
Oh my goodness.
It's titled Faithless.
Yes.
And it's pretty much all from Tavin's perspective. And you're probably thinking, but how does that work? Well, Fi has his tooth.
Yes. She calls on an owl witch tooth and Tavin's baby tooth that he gave her, and uses them to sort through Tavin's memories and find out what happened.
So we start when he's 9, and we kind of work through his life chronologically from that point on. And
we see the moment that he thought Fi was dead.
And we see
Coda recruiting him to be a spy.
And this is why I have conflicting feelings about Coda. Because Coda knew the entire time.
And he knew how much pain Jasimir and
Fi were in. And he said, greater good. But I would argue that that doesn't really work in this case.
I think it was the best chance they had at success.
It was a logical choice. but I don't think it was a good choice.
Correct.
I'm going to make a comparison that I think both of you are going to know.
Oh.
Bones.
Bones.
The TV show.
Yes, I've seen some of it.
At one point, Booth dies.
Oh.
He gets shot.
Oh.
They have a whole funeral,
Oh.
and then he comes back.
Oh.
And Brennan literally smacks him across the face and is like, why didn't you tell me? And he was like, you were on my list of people to tell. Like, you were supposed to know that I wasn't dead. And it's this whole big thing and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that is very much reminiscent of this. Mm-hmm. And the person who kept it from Bones was Sweets.
Ah.
And in this case, Sweets is equivalent to Coda.
Huh.
Yep. I'm ready to smack Coda. Like, across the face, open palm.
That's a take.
We have that whole scene, and we keep going. Fi's upset, but Fi keeps wanting more information.
And we find out that when Tavin first encountered her in, like, outside of Jasimir's cell, he, like, took her by the arm and read her cast, and he knew.
And he was so relieved.
He said, he seized her arm, reading the cast in her blood to know what he was dealing with. A crow. A witch. It hadn't even taken her 7 days to break into the royal palace and find a prince hidden in a secret prison known only to Phoenix monarchs. She was absolutely going to murder him by the end of the week. He'd never been more delighted.
I want to talk about the next memory.
Oh, yes.
So this is just after the coronation, and everything kind of went to 12 hells and back.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have this after Rusana asked him to kill Fi. And he's like, you know, as soon as I finished with that, I vomited. Like, she missed me vomiting. And he was trying so hard to exist, right? And he goes to his bed and he pulls out the blanket that they had shared at one point, and he's like, it smells like her, like, it has all of the things that I miss about her. And he goes, he didn't know how many more times he could cry into it, being the blanket, before the smell of her would be lost for good. And that is the line that I read to people to convince them to read these books.
It's a good line. Is that the line that sold you, Leah?
I don't know. I don't remember what it was.
I was talking to one of my students, because I've been reading this at school, and she was like, I don't understand how you read. Like, reading is just boring to me.
Boo.
So, she's one of my ducklings.
Gotcha.
And I said her name. I said, Darlin, I'm going to read you a passage, and I want you to tell me how this makes you feel. And I read this part, and I said, and he was lying on his own bed, face buried in the blanket he'd made sure to take with him from Draga's camp, because it was the only thing in this entire damned palace that still smelled like Fi. And I was like, and he didn't know how many more times he could cry into it before the smell of her would be lost for good. And she looked at me, and she goes, wait, what? And I was like, yeah.
Guess you gotta read it.
Now you gotta read it.
She's like, I can't see that in my head. And I was like, girl, we all got that issue at some point.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Do you not have that problem?
I only see, like, it plays as a movie in my head, basically.
Teach me your ways.
So Rachel and I have had this conversation
many a times.
And I cannot understand how people don't see it.
And I don't understand
like
how people see it. But my student was just so, like, struck by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and that's how you convince people to read. Not by forcing them to read Fahrenheit 451.
Correct. That's that on the classics.
Yes, indeed. So we have this whole, like, memory lane, and more things go up, and we find out about the parchment that Jasimir had copied down, and he had changed some of the language, and Rusana didn't check before she signed it, so Draga signs it, and Tavin signs it, but Tavin had signed every single one as Dracinda instead of Jasimir.
Mm-hmm. Making all of them
invalid,
yes.
Except for the one that he noticed had been changed.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had read through all of them.
Right. The Queen
always
did
read
not.
the terms and conditions. Folks.
Yes. So now Tavin's gone and nobody can find him.
Mm-hmm. And this ball is starting, and we're all like, oh, where's Tavin? And Fi wants to find him first so she can smack him, and then so she can kiss him.
Yes. And we have this whole, like, go find him, he's in danger, something is not good. And all hell starts breaking loose, right? The people are running around, there's stuff happening, the queen has gone crazy, Master General is doing her thing, like, there is a full-out, like, little battle scene happening right now between Skin Gas starting. They're not quite fully there yet, and then the Hawks, who are following the Master General's orders. And we go and find Tavin. He's in the catacombs, dying of poison, but he's a hawk, so it doesn't affect him fully. He's just kind of really drunk.
He's a little poisoned.
He's a little poisoned. Yeah, he'll be fine.
Because of his healing abilities.
Right. So, I'm skipping ahead again.
We're on page, like, 344.
Yes. Then they realize that they're hearing something else, so they go and seek it out.
In the catacombs.
In the catacombs. And... Leah, who do they find?
The stupid king! Oh my goodness! Ugh.
Jazzmere has come to join them in the catacombs,
yes.
by the way.
And Jazzmere is so relieved to find Tavin. Pissed off and relieved.
Yes.
Understandably, yet again.
But both boys are put face to face with their father. And
who has the plague?
Yeah. Like,
he has not been killed by the plague somehow, and he is wasting away.
Yes, because the whole point of it, the whole point of the Sinner's Plague is that you are being shamed for something, right? You did something bad, or somebody around you did something bad.
The plague is divine judgment.
Yes, and it is not, it's not going to plan.
Judgment cannot take place when there is no one to witness it.
So they drag him out to the palace grounds. Literally, drag him.
I like this moment where they first see that it's Suramir. Tavin stiffened at Fi's side, but Jazzmere was the one to put a name to the wreckage before them. Father? And I wrote, it is a reckoning for both of them with their father. Like, this is the moment where they are finally putting this monster to rest. And they both have different ways of dealing with that, but it's what happens.
Right.
Anyway.
So they drag him out.
They drag him out onto the palace grounds, and there are other crows there.
Well, they're outside the palace walls. Yes. The hawks are not letting them come in at all. And Fi is saying, like, let the crows in. They need to come in.
What page?
354. And there's a part here, where is it? On 355. So Fi's in there with the boys carrying the king.
Because once the king dies, the plague is going to spread like wildfire.
Like, instantly.
And it's going to be an ash harvest again.
Yeah.
And they need as many crows as possible.
Yeah.
That's why they're waiting.
So at the top of 355 it says, then she being Fi, she planted her feet on the tiles of the courtyard and let out a piercing, unmistakable scream. A silent heartbeat passed. Then the answer roared back like a hurricane, shrieking from beyond the palace walls, carving from hundreds, maybe 1,000 throats. That is crazy. All, like, those are all crows answering her call.
Yes! The hawks let them in.
Well, I'm sorry. If I were a hawk against 1,000 crows, I would too. And the thing that I find really cool is we have this water imagery, right? We've got the hurricane, and then instead the messenger had sent her a flood. And we have all this water imagery. And every single threat that Fi has faced through the Merciful Crow and through this one has come with water imagery, right? They're in
Cheparoke, which is a
water town.
They
fall at the bridge with the water, right? We have the Well of
Grace.
Yes, which is also
she almost
water.
Drowns in the river at the camp.
That's right.
So we have water imagery,
and
like
finally
all over.
Water is the help to come to get her.
Right. And then Fi starts counting, right? Like, you have to the count of whatever to
Just
to
like
let
when
them
she
in.
called the money dance in the first book.
We have another parallel.
Parallel structure.
And by 33, the gates had cracked open. Beyond them stood more crows than Fi had ever seen in her entire life, more than she could dream of. She saw chiefs and masks and teeth waiting for her call. At the front stood Jade, mask in one hand, chief's blade in the other. Beside her stood Lakima.
She didn't die! I have to be honest, I totally forgot she didn't die in this book, so I just assumed she was dead, like, on my reread, and Rachel was like, she doesn't die, and I was like, oh, I'm stupid. So, she doesn't die, and we're all very thankful.
The first time I reread this book, I had also forgotten that she didn't die.
Oh, good.
So,
makes me feel
you're
better.
not alone. Fi's throat closed, but she had no time for sentiment now. She took a deep breath and whistled the marching order. So, they're all coming in now, and she has already told the boys to say goodbye to their dad, like, make any reconciliation you need.
And we don't hear that.
No.
She says this is their moment to make whatever reconciliation
Whatever peace they need.
Mm-hmm. And she lets them have that moment.
And
she kills him.
Deservingly.
Yes. And she uses her own blade to do it.
Right.
For a while, Fi has carried two blades. She's carried her chief's sword and the sword that Tavin gave her. She finishes this with her chief's blade. And that's when, as we've said many times, the 12 Hells breaks loose and there's plague everywhere and we have got to take care of this.
Yes, but we are not going to take care of it in the way that we think we are going to take care of it because Tavin has the plague.
Yep.
When I first read
thought
this,
we were in the clear.
When I first read this, I was openly sobbing.
Aw, Rachel.
Sobbing.
I probably was too.
I was upset.
Maybe not as much as you.
I was reading these when you two were graduating.
I was a little busy.
Yeah. I did record you. Because I was watching it on the TV.
Oh, that's fun.
So I have a recording of you, because you did a little speaking part.
I did a little speaking part. They were like, hey, you work here, why don't you do this? And I was like, okay.
It was great. I loved it.
Thank you.
So now we need to find a way to cure Tavin of...
Because we cannot lose Tavin again. We just
got
him back.
We just got him back. We literally, maybe kissed him once and smacked him. And now we need him forever. Mm-hmm. Right? He's our boy.
Fi is screaming.
Yeah.
I did everything you asked. I gave him mercy. I called for crows. She has done so much. And she's like, what else do I need to do? I want him to be with me. That's all I want.
Someone was always going to pay a price.
Mm-hmm. But then Fi has an epiphany.
Right.
And she realizes there's another way out of this that doesn't involve cutting everybody's throats.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells Jade, the other chief that we know, she tells her, gather the plague infected, but don't deal mercy. And Jade's like, what?
Don't do it?
Like, huh? Fi says, just hear me out, okay? We're just gonna do this, and we're just gonna try it.
Right, and it's kind of twofold, because part of it is she has this theory that something is going to work, and if they keep killing the plague infected, it's just going to give more people for Rusiana to use.
Right.
And we really want to stop that second one. I love this next scene because she's trying to drag Tavin to the Well of Grace, and she can't. She is physically not strong enough.
Right.
And then she goes, the weight eased. Madcap had slipped Tavin's other arm over their shoulder. Where to, Chief? They asked. The hall. And then the next thing you know, it's the
rest of her band comes to help her.
And that's important.
Yes.
That is super important. Because you need 12 crows to agree. Mm-hmm. This person is worthy of saving.
Yeah. So, I'm going to jump ahead and then we can come back to this. So, Fi realizes that the crows, through her memories of Ambra and through her own, figuring things out, Fi realizes that the crow's birthright is that that dealing mercy is not just taking the lives of sinners, of people who have the plague. It is also deciding when someone deserves a second chance.
Right.
And they can heal somebody of the plague. You need 12 crows and you need a tooth from each cast.
Or a bone.
A bone. You need bones from each cast. And so this proof that these other crows believe that Tavin is worthy to be saved.
Or that they just trust their chief so much.
That they trust her judgment. And they're willing to go with it.
Mm-hmm. So where in the palace walls are there bones of all 12 casts?
They're going to the well of grace.
Which gives the name a whole nother meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we are running to the Well of Grace. There are skin ghasts attacking them, and like one by one, the crows kind of all fall back until it's just Tavin and Fi.
Mm-hmm. And Rusana confronts them and she kind of tries to give her villain speech, actually. It's almost comedic, but it's not. Yeah. She kind of gives her villain speech, like, you don't know what it's like. You have no idea how it feels to never belong anywhere, to have no home, to know your very existence could get you killed. And I was like, lady, please.
Do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah. And Fi just says, I don't have time for this. And she drags herself and Tavin over the railing, and they fall into the Well of Grace.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some more memories, but more importantly, we find out who Fi's god is, and it's the Eater of Bones.
Who watched all of her siblings die. Mm-hmm. The Eater of Bones was the last god alive.
Yes, and she's the goddess of rebirth.
Yes. And it hurts, right? Like, everyone is in pain because we're going through this massive change and this massive loss.
Yeah.
And Ambra was...
In another life, the Eater of Bones was Ambra, who was a phoenix, and...
She failed.
Mm-hmm. And because of that failure, the crows lost their birthright. They, like, everything became worse. And that's really where the problem started. And the last kind of memory that we have is life after life. This is page 372. Life after life, she failed her oath. She had joined the crows, but she had no crown to forsake. Life after life, Sabor grew crueler to her own because it could. Without fire teeth, without the full weight of their birthright, they had little to offer but a swift death, and little to threaten but mutual destruction. And then, in a life where she was called Fi, a plague beacon lit over the royal palace and called her home. And because the Well of Grace is the Eater of Bones' grave, that's her god grave.
I want to read part of the next bit. She saw what had been, she saw what could be. She had the bones of a dead god on her tongue. She had all her lives in her skull. She had the weight of Tavin dragging them to the bottom of the Well of Grace, to the bottom of her own grave. She was the Eater of Bones. Mercy was her gift. Covenant be damned, she was going to give it. She didn't have 12 crows, she had herself. She didn't have 12 teeth, but the dust of thousands of bones. And she had a boy who told her it was enough.
And Tavin is saved, and so are all the other plague infected in the palace.
Yes. Except for the king.
And then she destroys Usana, basically.
She doesn't. Isn't it the tiger?
Yeah.
So the tiger had been in control of Rusana.
Other way around.
Rusana had been
in control.
Other way around.
Strike that.
Take those two words.
Reverse it.
Yep. Other way. Because she had something of the tiger, like, woven.
The fur in her bracelet or something.
Yeah, it was somehow connected to it.
Fi can see, like, she is more powerful on her own god grave, right? Just like we have that Pa also mentions that.
Or Pi.
She saw unseen strings like hair. Each one conjured a face, a name, a desire. And Fi just can see all of these threads that Rusana is pulling, and she just basically, like, figuratively cuts them. And Rusana loses her control over everything, and her tiger is the one who kills her. And Tavin just kind of looks over his shoulder and winces, and it's like, that's all we need to know.
Yep, we're good. We don't need any more.
But then he and Fi are laying there, and he sees she has a cut on her face, and he tries to heal her. And he can't.
It doesn't work.
It don't work.
But something Maggie pointed out to me.
I had to prove Rachel wrong. So
I said I don't know, but I don't think so.
It gets unpacked.
I didn't say...
It gets unpacked in the next chapter, but when the crows choose to give mercy in this way of giving someone a second chance, they become a crow.
Yeah, they lose their birthright.
They lose their birthright. They lose their birthright and become a crow. And because Tavin was a witch before this, he's now a crow witch. Which every time I say it makes me think of a crow sandwich. I don't know why. But he's now a crow witch. And yeah. Fi hands him a hawk tooth and it responds to him, like in the same way that the teeth respond to Fi's touch. And I just said, I love this, because not only is Tavin alive, he is released from the burden of his lineage. He is not a hawk or a phoenix anymore. He is a crow, and he is himself.
He is released of any burden that his previous parentage held over him.
And not that Draga is a bad mother.
No.
But I think that weighed on him. Like, his parentage was a burden that he carried in secret and in public later. Mm-hmm. And now he is freed of that. He's freed of the evidence of that. He gets to be himself. Yeah. And then some stuff gets unpacked in the last chapter, too.
But stuff we have to talk about. First of all, Jazzmir is like, haha, I'm not going to be king. Mm-hmm. I will be king for less than a year. Like, literally one day less than a year. And we are going to work out a new, like...
government.
Yeah, it's going to be a democracy-ish. Like, each cast is going to elect people to represent them. But I'm going to choose some of them for this first one.
Yes.
Whatever, it's totally fine. And he and Coda then have this little conversation on page 382. And Coda's like, so here's how things wrapped up, like, here it is. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, I'm certainly going to be, let's try that again. Oh, I'm certainly going to be cast out for. Coda waved a hand at the swaths of charred rubble. All this, probably for the best. Jazzmir straightened, startled. You want to leave them? Coda didn't answer a moment, throat working. You were right, you know, both you and Fi. We helped a monster like Suramir stay in power, and we let everyone else pay the price. And they said it was all for the best of Sabor. But if that is what was best, I don't want any part of it. He finally looked Jazzmir in the eye, as if he had more to say, then bowed. Take care of yourself, your majesty. Jazzmir didn't say a word as Coda strode from the pavilion. Fi seized Jazzmir by the sleeve. Tell me everything! His cheeks darkened. He clapped his hands over them, cringing. It was just, when you sent me to go find Barf in the guest quarters, I was trying to get her out from under the bed, and then Coda showed up because he thought someone should save the cats, and we were both scared out of our minds, and things happened. Fi looked at Tavin, Tavin looked at her, then he looked at Jazzmir, on a scale of 1 to window seat, and Jazzmir shoved him.
Which is an appropriate reaction, I think.
Yes. But then Fi convinces Jazzmir to go after Coda.
Yeah. And we're just kind of left with, something will happen here, probably. Mm-hmm. She's like, hey, you could always use a spy master for this 1 year that you're going to be king.
Yeah.
And Tavin is going to join her on the roads.
I love how it ends, because the very last sentence of it... I'll read the last 3 sentences.
Okay.
Together they led her crows from the ruins of the palace to the road that would lead them on. Fi did not look back. She knew her way home.
And that's how it ends.
And that's how it ends.
So, Rachel, what did you give this book as a rating?
I'm
sure we can get
5 stars.
I think these are 5-star reads for all of us,
right?
Yeah,
I think so.
5 stars. Hands down, 5 stars.
Merciful Crow, Faithless Hawk, all 5 stars.
These books should be more popular than they are.
I strongly agree. I mean, there's so much that we didn't even touch on in the, 4 hours that we've recorded today?
5 hours?
Holy crap. This is going to be a fun time to edit for Rachel, but...
This is why you do the social media and I do the editing.
Indeed.
That's our division of labor right now.
Division of labor. That's what makes a society, according to my history classes from middle school. But there's just so much that's here. Like, there's so much about class commentary. There's so much about, like, wealth and economics. And there's, like, relationships and family and where we find our family and what kind of legacies our family give us. And just,
Okay, you two.
Uh-huh.
Are you glad I forced you to read these books?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I think that's the nicest you've ever been about it, Leah. Because normally when I ask Leah if she'll read a book, she's like, I have so many other books to read. I want to read my own books.
Because she gives me so
In
many
fairness,
books.
you do the same thing to her.
Yeah, I know.
I just want to read my own book.
Hey, I did get the one book on hold at the library.
Okay.
So don't even...
The one book I
The one book.
recommend.
No. Go away.
But that's the end of our episode, and if you can tell from my voice, I've been talking a lot, and I think we should wrap things up.
And this is our last book of the season.
This is our last book of the season, so we're going to do a wrap-up episode soon,
Mhm.
and then we'll be on to our second season of our podcast in a couple weeks, which is very exciting.
Yes, and we will talk about that in our wrap-up episode.
Yeah.
So, for now,
don't forget you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at BookExpertPod. You can email us at notthebookexpert@gmail.com or visit our website at bookexpertpod.wordpress.com. All of those links are always in the description if you need them. And if you enjoy our show and if you enjoy listening to us talk about books for several hours, you can leave us a review on Apple or wherever you find your podcast, and we would love to hear what you think.
Indeed.
So, and thank you again, Leah, for being a
Yeah,
part of
thank
this
you.
show
Yeah,
and spending
of
the day
course.
with us.
I had a good time.
I'm glad that this worked out, and I'm glad we got to do this in person.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
I really enjoyed this experience.
So, with that, have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Hope you know your own way home.
Ah!